I waited 30 years to open that bookstore. Not because it was difficult, but because life kept getting in the way. There were bills, responsibilities, and people who depended on me, so the dream stayed folded inside me like a receipt I never threw away. Every year I told myself I would do it next year. Next year turned into decades. When I finally retired, I used my savings to rent a narrow corner shop downtown. It was nothing special, but to me, it felt enormous. I painted the walls myself. I built the shelves with my own hands. Each board felt like reclaiming a piece of time I had lost. On opening day, I unlocked the door before sunrise. I stood there breathing in the smell of paper and fresh paint. For the first time in years, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. Customers came slowly, mostly curious neighbors. Some bought books, others just talked. I did not mind either way. The store was less about selling and more about existing. Around noon, the bell above the door rang again. A man I had never seen walked in and looked around carefully. He did not browse. He did not speak. He just stood there like he recognized the place. Then he said something that made no sense. This store used to belong to my father. I thought he must be mistaken. The building had been empty for years before I rented it. But he began describing details only someone familiar would know. Where the old counter once stood. How there had been a reading chair by the window. Even the way sunlight used to fall across the floor in the afternoon. He was describing my shop before it was mine. The man explained his father had owned a bookstore here decades earlier. It closed suddenly after his father became ill. The family never returned. He had only come back now, after many years away. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. We were standing in the same place for different reasons. He asked if he could sit for a while. I brought him a chair. We talked quietly between customers. He told stories about growing up among bookshelves. I told him how long I had waited to build this place. Somehow, our stories did not clash. They overlapped. Days passed, and he returned again. Then again the next week. Eventually, he began helping customers find books. Not because I asked. Because it felt natural to him. We never discussed ownership again. The store no longer felt like mine alone. It felt shared across time. Customers noticed the warmth of the place. Some said it felt like it had always been there. Perhaps it had. One evening, the man brought an old photograph. It showed his father standing exactly where I now stood. The same light through the window. The same quiet expression. I realized something then. Dreams do not always begin where we think they do. Sometimes they continue where someone else had to stop. We did not take over each other's lives. We carried them forward. The bookstore became more than a retirement project. It became a meeting place between past and present. And every morning when I unlocked the door, I felt gratitude instead of ownership, because some places are never meant to belong to just one person. They exist so that different lives can continue the same story. At first, we worked side by side without asking too many questions. There was an unspoken understanding between us. He knew the rhythm of the place as if he had never left. I knew the effort it had taken to bring it back to life. Together, those two things somehow balanced. Customers began to stay longer than usual. They said the store felt calm in a way they could not explain. Some afternoons, we did not sell a single book. Yet, those were often the best days. People came to talk, to read, or simply to sit quietly. It reminded him of how his father used to run the shop. It reminded me why I had wanted this life in the first place. One morning, he arrived carrying a small wooden box. Inside were old bookmarks, faded receipts, and handwritten notes. They were pieces of the store that existed long before me. We placed them near the counter without saying anything. They did not feel like decorations. They felt like memories returning to their place. As weeks turned into months, the bookstore found its own rhythm again. Not mine, not his, but something shared. We never discussed business arrangements. It never felt like a transaction. It felt like stewardship. Taking care of something that mattered. One rainy afternoon, he asked why I had waited so long to follow my dream. I told him the truth. I thought there would always be time later. He nodded, as if he understood too well. His father had said the same thing once. Later had come too late for him. That was why returning here mattered so much. We were not reopening a store. We were finishing something unfinished. The realization changed how I saw every day inside those walls. This place was not about the past. It was about continuation. About allowing stories to move forward instead of ending. Customers began bringing their own stories with them. They shared memories connected to books they loved. The shop became less like a business and more like a gathering place. Sometimes we closed late because conversations lasted longer than expected of us minded. There was no rush anymore. One evening, as we locked the door, he paused before leaving. He thanked me for opening the store again. I told him he had helped me understand why it mattered. We both realized something simple. Dreams are rarely owned by one person alone. They move from one life to another. And when they are carried forward, they grow stronger. Now, every morning when I unlock the bookstore, I feel that continuity, not as pressure, but as gratitude. Gratitude for the years it took to get here. Gratitude for the stranger who was not really a stranger. Gratitude for the chance to continue something meaningful. The bookstore still stands on that same narrow corner. Its shelves hold more than books now. They hold pieces of many lives. And every person who walks in adds another page, including me. Including him. Because the story of this place was never finished. It was only waiting to be continued. And now, every day we open the door again. Not to begin something new, but to keep something meaningful alive. Some dreams take years to arrive. Others arrive through unexpected people. And sometimes, when you finally reach them, you discover they were never yours alone.